If there's one thing that retro gamers like, it's old stuff. I mean, hey, if you've got self-esteem, then there's one old thing you like right there. But whether you're an older retro gamer or a younger retro gamer, fingers crossed we're still getting more of those, it can be nice to know that the things you love will always be lovable. And the things you enjoy will always be enjoyable. It's like they always say, friends come and go, life changes, but a Sega Genesis game is forever. Or wait, maybe that's actually diamonds, but come on, can diamonds make you feel this? I don't think so. Yeah, why don't we just change that old saying to a Genesis game is forever? So long as it's not one of the ones that sucks, there we go, I think we're ready to get it trademarked. Now, for those of you who don't already know the drill for these games that will always be fun videos that I do, what's important to remember is that these are not the only games I think will always be fun, and it's not even my top 5 games. Rather, it's an opportunity for me to highlight 5 games that I feel especially confident will always have a place in gamers' hearts for years to come, and for reasons besides just being good games. That said, the Genesis is definitely one of those consoles where if you ever loved a game on it, except for maybe a few when you were a susceptible to loving garbage kid, but if you ever loved a Genesis game, there's a good chance you'll always love it, at least assuming you're a fan of 2D games, which have a reputation for aging well, and especially the 2D games from this era. It's just something I've noticed. Love for 2D games seems to endure. I've never heard of a full-grown adult waking up and saying, you know what, today's the day I tell my jerk boss to take a hike, and I think I've decided 2D sprite work looks ugly. In any case, think of the 5 games I mentioned more so as a celebration of those 5 games, and not as an insult towards whichever games aren't on the list, except for Captain Planet and the Planeteers, sorry. But with that said, the first game on my list is Rystar. I still get conflicting opinions on how you should pronounce the name, mostly from the Tomato folks who still haven't given up the fight, but I finally decided I wanted to just call it Rystar because it sounds like Rising Star, and that makes me feel good. But regardless of how you pronounce it, you stand a good chance to enjoy playing it. What makes Rystar notable for a lot of people is the character's proximity to Sonic. I mean, just looking at his face, he looks like some sort of weird relative of Sonic, and that's because he sort of is in a way. When Sega was coming up with ideas for a mascot that eventually turned into Sonic, one of the ideas that they didn't use was eventually revisited and turned into Rystar, or Ristar, dang it, why do I always try to be so accommodating? Sonic was the speedy platformer that went in a vastly different direction than the platformers that had come before it. But have you ever wondered what would have happened if Sega made a more traditional platformer for the Genesis? Well, wonder no longer. Rystar is that game. Not to say it doesn't have some unique mechanics of its own. Hey, remember when we were talking about Rystar's face? Well, Rystar is a proud member of the Sega Genesis Attack Stuff With Your Face Club. That's right. Long arms and a face that's not afraid to take a beating. I can relate to Rystar. I think people will always find this game interesting in large part because Sonic has proven to be something people still find interesting, with no signs of stopping. And while the game design of Sonic is somewhat polarizing due to the speedy gameplay, Rystar might appeal to those who are looking for something that feels more like the 2D platformers they're already used to, but not to the point of why bother with this game. I'm telling you, mastering the arms and face mechanics in this game takes some getting used to, while also providing the main intrigue for the game, as the level design and challenges are all built around these mechanics. So it's a more traditional platformer than Sonic, but at the same time, there's really no other game like it, even to this day, and what I imagine will be many more days to come, making it a perfect game to represent the Genesis, in my opinion. But with that said, we can't talk about Sonic without talking about Sonic, which leads to my next game on the list, Sonic, and specifically Sonic 2. Although I should note that I'm using the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge here to play as Knuckles, just to be a rascal. Okay, so like I said, the gameplay style of classic Sonic is a little too untraditional for some folks, but overall, I still think a large chunk of people will be intrigued by it. There's nothing quite like these games. Oh, that's right, except for that one. What it comes down to is this. There will still be people playing the classic Sonic games, so long as there's still people playing Sega Genesis games, which, yep, until I'm dead, I can promise there will be at least one. I'm not sure there's ever been a console more synonymous with a specific game series, and yes, I understand people will debate that, but check this out. Couldn't even call it the Ultimate Genesis Collection. Had to call it Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection. And while yeah, that seems like a weird choice for a title regardless, even Nintendo, I doubt would ever call something Mario's Nintendo Collection, because Nintendo has a lot of other IPs that are pretty recognizable. So yeah, people are going to be curious about the Genesis Sonic games for a long time to come, and it certainly doesn't hurt that the games are considered great games. Although I will point out that the first Sonic game can feel a bit rough without the spin dash mechanic, a real game changer in Sonic 2, literally. And the original Sonic game has 3 acts per zone, which just feels too long. To me at least, I don't feel the original game is as compelling as 2, 3, and Knuckles, which some people will want to slap me for. I tell you what, I'll do it for you. If you really want to play Sonic 1 with the spin dash, there are certain releases that went back and added it in. Next game I want to talk about is Gunstar Heroes. You want to talk about a unique experience. Yes, there are other run and gun games, but no run and gun, or any game for that matter, that spikes your heart rate quite like this game, except for maybe DDR. Move your body. A lot of you backed me up the first time I said this, but it's one of those games where you can only play so long because of how intense it is, and you notice your body's nervous system noticeably coming back down to a more calm state when you stop. Hey, actually, quick little idea for you, a hybrid game that mixes Gunstar Heroes with DDR. Playing that could send you to the hospital. It could be called Gunstar DDR. I really do need to go to the trademark office. Besides making great use of the Genesis hardware to push a lot of action on screen all at once, a lot of the game's soundtrack sounds like various high security facility alarm sounds orchestrated into different musical tracks, all of which sound really cool, by the way. The other thing is this, for how well known the run and gun genre was back in the late 80s and early 90s, there really aren't as many of them as you would think. Don't get me wrong, there are some other ones, and some really good ones at that, but not as many games as there were for some other genres, like platformers. Point is, Gunstar Heroes sticks out as one of the greatest in the genre, and a very easy, quick recommendation for anybody looking for a good run and gun game, regardless of which era you're looking at. Alright, and while we're talking about blowing stuff up, why don't we talk about the Thunder Force games? 3 and 4 are both great, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick Thunder Force 4, also known as Lightning Force in the US, because why keep a cool name when you can change it and misspell it? So what do we have here? Well, a common candidate for the best shoot 'em up of the 16-bit era. Not to mention, one of the most bangin' soundtracks you'll ever hear. Seriously, just listen to the song I've linked to in a pinned comment down below, and for some people, that alone will make you want to play this game. I'm not kidding. And am I someone who would ever stretch the truth? But Lightning Force is one of those games that just feels like a Genesis game. Yep, grippy spot on the back, label covering the front, but more than that, it's just got that gritty aesthetic that the Genesis seemed to pride itself on, which fits perfectly into a shoot 'em up, and this game exemplifies the genre as well as any. The final game I'd like to talk about is Shinobi 3. Oh, by the way, Rocket Knight Adventures is just a given. I mean, right? Like suggesting food as something to eat? But Shinobi 3, I've always thought of this game as one of the better examples of a game that is easy to get into, but also has a lot there for those who want to invest more into it. Some of the people who play this game never even use the entire moveset available to you, which can be very useful, not to mention speed things up. Seriously, I'd suggest it though. Imagine if you thought all you could do was walk, and then discovered running. Holy smokes, this is so much quicker! This game is also one of the first games I think of when it comes to blending an arcade-style game with home console sensibilities, which makes sense seeing as Shinobi has roots in the arcade. Basically, just take the accessibility and instant appeal of arcade-style games, tweak the difficulty to be just tough enough, flesh everything out a bit more, including the stages, weapons, items, moveset, and then make the game last longer than a typical arcade game would. Jackpot. That's Shinobi 3 for you, and why this game is, in my opinion, a perfect Sega Genesis game. A console whose identity was a home console with arcade sensibilities. But there we have it for the 5 games I wanted to highlight in this video. And again, a friendly reminder, this doesn't mean I think these are the only 5 Genesis games that will always be fun. If there's a game I didn't mention that you'd like to highlight, please do so in the comments. Odds are, it's a game that I also love. I've played this console a lot and tend to agree with a lot of the good things people like to say about it. So, with that, leave a comment with the game you'd like to highlight or any other thoughts you may have, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro bird, oh yes, and he hopes that you liked what he had to say.